Vanilla perfumes are often called the little black dresses of the fragrance world because they're timeless, they're effortlessly elegant and always appropriate. But what is it about vanilla that makes it so popular? Why do we keep coming back to it decade after decade, and what kind of vanilla scents are on offer today? Those are the questions I'm excited to explore and find answers to in this video. Vanilla turned out to be an absolutely massive topic, so it was kind of difficult to plan this episode and try and mention everything that I wanted to mention. So maybe there will be a second video, I don't know yet, but first thing first, let me introduce myself. My name is Ksenia, but the usual short version of my name is actually Susha. But somewhere along the way, a friend started calling me a sushi bear, which I thought is like super duper cute. And not long after, my husband started calling me sushi, so I decided to roll with that as my channel name. Okay, name explained, what am I doing here? So I'm starting this channel to share my discoveries about perfumes and the world of scent. Both the wonderfully fragrant,
well, that's like summer in a bowl,
and the, sometimes not so wonderfully fragrant. Why? Well, first, because I've always been fascinated by the sense of smell. And second, because from an average consumer perspective, like, myself, the perfume world can feel a bit, mysterious and overwhelming, and at times, like, even a little bit unapproachable. That's why I'll be getting my nose into the history, science, and inner workings of the industry, wherever I can. All the while testing perfumes and their ingredients with my own nose and occasionally getting my family's and friends' noses for a second opinion. And if that sounds like your kind of fun, stick around and don't forget to give the like button a playful little bit. Okay, vanilla. I will begin with vanilla as an ingredient first before moving on to the perfumes I purchased for this video, because it kind of makes sense to understand the raw material before exploring how it's used in perfumes. So now, I started my research by going through all kinds of fashion and lifestyle articles just to get a quick character statement on the suspect. And it seems like ever since the rise of gourmand fragrances back in the 90s, vanilla note really became mainstream, both as supporting act and as the main note. But last year, vanilla truly took the center stage. We had some vanilla perfumes that went properly viral, and in TikTok, the hashtag vanilla perfume received on average something like 20 million views per week. And just for comparison, the whole population of Romania is actually 19 million. So that's kind of a lot of people. And if you think about it, just one platform. Yeah, vanilla is definitely having a bit of a moment. But to be fair, humanity has always had strong feelings about vanilla from the very moment we discovered it. I love you, I love you, I love you. Because flashback to ancient times, the Totonac tribe, they're the first cultivators of vanilla. And literally they believed that vanilla was too good for casual consumption. They reserved it for sacred ceremonies and offerings to their gods. Another example is Madame de Montespan. So she took baths scented with vanilla, and considering how expensive and extremely rare it was in the 17th century, both vanilla and bathing, that was one very opulent step in her perfume routine. All to impress the king. So if you wanted to achieve the same ludicrous level of extravagance today, you probably would have to tip an entire jar of black caviar into your bath. Though, unlike vanilla, it won't aid your, amorous engagements.
What is that smell? That would be you.
Going forward into the 19th and 20th centuries, vanilla was still so rare and expensive that vanilla farmers had to brand their beans like cattle, which apparently still happens to this day. So yeah, from Mesoamerican rituals to TikTok, it seems like we're still a little bit obsessed. But let's fast forward to slightly more recent times. Some say that this massive vanilla obsession is just another nostalgia wave, like a 19s deja vu. Because apparently that decade was drenched in vanilla scent. From perfumes, to toys, to stationery, to shopping malls, apparently everything smelled of vanilla. That doesn't sound too bad. I personally wouldn't mind that, like especially when I was a child growing up in a small Eastern European town back in the 90s. My son's memories formed mostly around things like, home cooking, and there wasn't much vanilla. Garlic, on the other hand, are a prominent feature in our household. My grandmother believed that industrial amount of garlic could be the answer to more or less everything. Maybe even to achieving, eternal life.
Twist the bones and bend the back. Eat it a cup of milk.
And yeah, who knows? She's 96, so maybe it worked. Or maybe the number one killer is not heart disease, but vampires. But I digress. Vanilla is a classic flavor that has always been in demand, and not just that, it's one of the most popular flavors globally, if not actually the most popular. And I think I might have found the reason for it. Firstly, vanilla has been shown to activate the brain's reward system by stimulating dopamine release, and dopamine is associated with feelings of comfort and satisfaction. This is the same happy chemical that kicks in when you eat, good food, win a game, or maybe, watch a funny video. Basically, it's able to create this feeling of soft addiction. This, in theory, would suggest vanilla is a sure crowd pleaser, right? So I did a bit more digging into that and found a study in Current Biology, and bear with me there because there's a big reason why I'm bringing it up. In that study, scientists explored how different cultures perceive smells. The researchers wanted to establish whether we like certain smells because of culture and upbringing, or we are biologically pre-programmed to love them, or maybe it's down to our individual preferences. So, it's a bit of a nature versus nurture question. And turns out it's all of the above, but mostly it's our DNA. So culture and upbringing, they matter, but not as much. Even if everyone around you loved surströmming growing up, you won't automatically find the smell of sewage fish appetizing. What really shapes your smell preferences is your genetics. Scientists found that about half of our olfactory receptors, the ones you have in your nose, are the same across all humans, meaning certain smells are universally liked or disliked. The other half is kind of a DNA roulette, so it differs from person to person.
Place your bets.
So another study shows that on average, two individuals have functional differences in over 30% of their olfactory receptors. So this means that each person's sense of smell is genetically unique to them, explaining why some people experience smells more intensely or differently to one another. That's exactly the reason why some people love coriander, and to others it tastes like, soap. And to the important bit. So in those two studies, I found vanillin was consistently rated as one of the most pleasant scents, with very little variation, suggesting that it might be one of those smells that most of us are biologically programmed to enjoy, unlike coriander and sewage fish. So, if you ever don't know what perfume to wear in a group setting, just go for vanilla. Statistically, most people's DNA will approve your choice. Ooh, there's another thing. So, humans are remarkably sensitive to the smell of vanilla. We can detect even extremely small concentrations of vanilla in the air. And that is good if you want your vanilla perfume to be noticed, right? But actually it depends. You see, our brain is constantly on the lookout for threats. Our noses haven't been given to us for fun. They're here to protect us from dangers like fire, disease, gone off chicken soup, smelly feet. And vanilla is a pleasant smell and signals zero danger. That is on the one hand, and on the other, because vanilla is part of our lives almost daily, that can lead to what's called sensory saturation. That is where your brain simply ignores a smell and you go nose blind to it. It's like when you come back from a holiday and for a very short bit, you are aware of what your home smells like. It's like, ooh, is that how it smells? But then in about 10 minutes, your brain ignores it again, like, same old. So pleasant smells, as well as very familiar ones, tend to be ignored by our brain, and quicker than unpleasant ones, because stay alert, don't get hurt. Since we encounter vanilla so often, our brain registers it as this again, and filters it out faster than a more unique or complex smell or an unpleasant smell, because it is more important for survival. So does that mean that vanilla perfumes are a terrible investment? You know, paying all that money just for your brain to toss that scent into the ignore folder. Not quite. Even when you're no longer consciously aware of a fragrance, your brain is still processing it at a subconscious level. Vanilla isn't just a pleasant smell. It has calming, mood-stabilizing effects, creating a subtle but lasting sense of comfort.
Tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy.
So once your brain registers this emotional response, you don't need to be actively aware of the scent for it to work its magic. It's still there, influencing your mood and background. And let's not forget, we're still animals, you know? Long before words, scent was a primary way of understanding the world. It carries meaning, signals safety, and evokes emotions in ways we barely notice. And vanilla is interpreted as comfort for most of us. So I'd say it's all pretty good news. Vanilla isn't likely to be irritating, and even if you or the people around you go nose blind to it quickly, you're still walking around like a cozy little cloud of comfort and joy.
Comfort and joy.
So the advice is still good. Vanilla seems to be a safe bet. But to the next issue now. How does one choose a vanilla perfume? Trying to list every vanilla fragrance and critically review them would be, well, unrealistic. There are thousands of perfumes and things like hair mists and body products. None of them would, advertise themselves as just average. And looking at reviews isn't always helpful, and sometimes even when a perfume has a vanilla in its literally name, it doesn't always deliver the vanilla you were looking for. Another thing I've noticed is that occasionally it can be a bit difficult to really pick out the vanilla scent in vanilla perfumes. People in general are quite bad at discriminating individual smells in complex blends like perfumes. On average, a person can usually recognize about 3 to 4 distinct smells in a complex blend like perfume. And it doesn't sound like much, does it? Especially when you look at the notes in every single perfume pyramid. Trained noses, like perfumists and sommeliers, they can pick out a bit more, around 10 individual smells in a blend. So myself and most perfume buyers were out here doing our best with whatever natural abilities we have, which is 3 to 4 notes we can separate from the complexity, which is most perfumes, and I feel like that's on a good day. That is why I thought that if I were to describe to you the smell of vanilla and vanilla perfumes, the logical move is to compare it to vanilla you might already know, right? So I thought I'd use some sort of references. So let's start with natural vanilla. The one that is an actual fruit of a vanilla orchid plant, Vanilla planifolia. It is a climbing vine, and out of 28,000 different orchid species on Earth, it is the only orchid that produces an edible fruit. A fruit that is dried and used for flavoring, which actually makes it a spice rather than a fruit. So vanilla is the second most expensive spice on Earth. It's very luxurious. However, there's a little conundrum. Vanilla is also so common that its name literally means basic.
God, you're basic. You even smell basic.
We all know it's a default flavor for just about everything. Like vanilla ice cream, vanilla cake, and vanilla scented candles. Those are normally quite affordable, right? And that doesn't make sense. But it turns out it actually does. Because only about 1% of all consumer products are made from a fully natural source, the vanilla orchid. That's it. 1. Yeah. Because it's too expensive and there simply aren't enough vanilla beans in the world to flavor every ice cream, latte, and perfume bottle on the market. So what is in the other 99%? Well, the rest is synthetic vanillin, which is, in my opinion, a chemistry masterpiece. A scientific workaround, and the reason we can all afford vanilla flavored things without taking out a mortgage. So 1% is the luxury spice territory, and the rest is a miracle of chemistry. And yeah, it is mainly vanillin and other related molecules that are used to create vanilla-like scents. Oh, fun fact. You know those little black specks you sometimes get in the vanilla ice cream? And I know most of you know that those are vanilla seeds. Naturally, you would assume that they are there for flavor. Except quite often, they are completely flavorless. Not always, but often. Because those seeds are usually exhausted seeds. Well, not like worked a 12-hour shift and needs a nap exhausted. I mean, they already did their job in the production of vanilla extract. So they got soaked, squeezed, and drained of all their flavor, and then they are sold again to bakeries and ice cream makers for aesthetic purposes. But the delightful vanilla taste really comes from the flavoring, whether it's synthetic or natural. And there's nothing bad about that, by the way. It just makes ice cream more affordable and visually attractive and slightly brunchy. But I digress again. Coming back to natural vanilla. The first time I encountered real vanilla, the one from the vanilla plant, was actually ages ago when I worked as a chef. It was a vanilla pod crushed into powder, and I thought, oh my god, that's gonna smell like, vanilla ice cream, but straight from heaven. Yes and kind of no. Natural vanilla is super complex. Yes, it is sweet and it is creamy, but it also smells earthy and smoky and spicy and a bit medicinal, and also a lot like dried fruits, and somehow even a touch metallic sometimes, but maybe that's just me, I don't know. Basically, my nose went into, what's happening territory.
What's happening?
And I wasn't sure if I like it all that much. Now I love it though. So here it is, a vanilla pod. By the way, good stuff should be oily, flexible, and you should be able to wrap and unwrap it around your finger, like this. This is an example of not so good vanilla pod because, as you can see, you can't wrap that around anything. This one has a lot of flavor. Oh, and it smells amazing. But this one, it has like some smell, but it's not much. And an interesting fact, this one was 3 times the price of this one. So the price isn't always a good indicator of quality. Obviously, for vanilla pods to be useful in perfumery, their flavor needs to be extracted. And there are many extraction methods out there, but I'll go through the 3 that seem to pop up the most. First one is alcohol-based extraction that makes vanilla tincture. That is the method of macerating vanilla beans in alcohol, usually ethanol, and over time, the alcohol breaks down the cell walls of the vanilla bean, releasing flavor and aroma molecules into the solution. And in the end, when vanilla beans are removed, you are left with flavored alcohol. It is something that could be made at home. There are many sources on the internet that could be used for guidance. But because it lacks strength, longevity, and most importantly, consistency, this extraction seems to be mostly used in artisan and DIY perfumery. Second is CO2 or supercritical carbon dioxide extraction. I think this one has popped up a lot recently. So in short, CO2 is put under a lot of pressure, which turns it into not quite liquid and not quite gas state, called supercritical CO2. And in this state, the gas acts as a selective solvent, drawing out the compounds that dissolve in it. And once these compounds have been collected, the CO2 is depressurized and turned back into a gas, leaving behind pure, untouched vanilla extract. No solvents, no chemical residue, it is clean and environmentally friendly extraction. But it is a costly process, which is why its use in perfumery is limited to the luxury segment. And finally, solvent extraction or vanilla absolute. It is a complicated process, but in short, it consists of dissolving the odor molecules of the plant in a solvent. It kind of works like a washing machine, and that happens in many stages and requires specialist equipment, but in the end, all the solvents are evaporated, leaving behind the concentrated extraction called absolute. It is also a very expensive ingredient, but less expensive than CO2 extraction. Hence, it is more common in perfumery because it's slightly cheaper and still of very high quality. By the way, more common in comparison, it is still reserved mostly for high-end perfumery. So I didn't make my own tincture, and CO2 extraction was harder to get by, but I got vanilla absolute. Here it is. Vanilla absolute, an ultra-concentrated extraction of vanilla beans and one of the most prized ingredients in perfumery. As you might see, it's a very dark liquid, a small kind of a goo. And this 5 grams of goo is made out of many, many vanilla pods. Contains multitudes. So, this is fairly pricey culinary ingredient, and this is one of the most expensive materials in perfumery. This is edible, and this one, due to its extraction method, should not be part of your pancake recipe. So, smelling vanilla absolute. So, straight from the jar. Oh, little penguin came off. Okay, Beacon. Yeah, straight from the jar, a bit too punchy. But it should be diluted. Here's the blotter I dipped into the dilution. And what does it smell like? Yeah, it smells smooth, it smells creamy, deep, warm, not overly sweet. It has like hints of tobacco, resin, and spice, and oh yeah, it really reminds me of raisins. And yeah, definitely. It really reminds me of hot sauna for some reason. It has this very woody smell to it. In my opinion, it's close to the pod. But if you were to compare it, the pod and the Absolute, basically the pod smells sweeter and creamier and somewhat like fresh or something. And the Absolute, yeah, it is woodier and smokier, and there is something like vintagey woody about it, you know? It's a very interesting smell, but still very, very close to the pod. And that's why I show them together, because normally people don't have vanilla absolute just lying about, and a pod or a vanilla powder, that's something you might have. They're way easier to find, and it's a great reference for what natural vanilla actually smells like, because yes, because it is natural vanilla. And also, it would give you an idea of what vanilla absolute or vanilla CO2 extraction would smell like. By the way, just to mention, CO2 extraction is similar to absolute, but it is even closer to the natural vanilla smell. So that was a little info on natural ingredients. Now let's move on to something we're all very well familiar with. Synthetic vanilla, or vanillin. This is an ingredient we come across a lot in comparison to natural vanilla. As you remember, 1%. Not a lot. Here I have pure vanillin crystals, the type that would be used in perfumery. They kind of look like salt, but they're kind of a bit more shimmery. The difference from the natural stuff is that vanilla pod packs around 250 aroma molecules to create its incredibly complex smell. And vanillin is one of those. Vanillin is one of those 250. But it is the standout, the character-forming molecule that is mostly responsible for the vanilla pod's success with humans. So you can think of it as, you know, Paul McCartney, essential to the band, but also a total legend on his own. So vanillin was first isolated in the 19th century, first from the natural vanilla bean itself, vanilla pod, then from spruce, then from wood tar, then from clove oil, then eventually from lining, a byproduct of paper industry. And fun fact, it actually qualifies for a natural label. So if you see a label saying natural vanillin, it's not necessarily from a pod, which would be a logical conclusion, right? But it could be from lining, because it is still coming from a plant source material, which is wood pulp. So after that, humans learned how to produce it from petrochemicals, which is 85% of all vanillin today. And also, there is even biosynthetic vanillin, which is produced from things like rice bran by genetically modified microorganisms. Basically, they do, a bit of a nom-nom-nom. And vanillin is a byproduct of their metabolism, kind of like poop. Talking about poop, there is also a way of making vanillin out of cow dung. So cow's digestion creates the perfect conditions for vanillin precursors. Yeah, the only issue apparently is that people are not too keen on spritzing themselves with something that came out of, the rear end of a cow. Whale vomit, on the other hand, yes, we want more of that. So go figure. Now, let's give vanillin a little sniff. I dipped a blotter into a ethanol vanillin solution, well, because you can't smell it straight from the jar because it's an irritant in its pure form. But once it's diluted, it's absolutely safe. So, yeah, it smells like vanilla. But seriously, it's the smell of everything that comes vanilla scented. It's creamy, it's sweet, it's delicious, it's exactly what you would expect. Obviously, it is not as complex as Vanilla Absolute, but it's a wonderful and cozy smell. If you use vanilla essence at home, that's actually the one. The best representation I can think for pure vanillin. Just like this one. Yeah. And I actually dipped a blotter into the essence as well, just for comparison. Yeah, it's very, very similar. So now, about vanillin being a mild irritant. Yeah, technically it is, but worry not.
Okay. Just stay calm.
The IFRA, or International Fragrance Association, is on it. They regulate its use in perfumes and cosmetics, so you don't basically have to. And by the way, they check all ingredients, not just vanillin. And anyways, it should be very much safe. But maybe you're wondering, like, what if vanillin is an irritant because it's mostly synthetic? You know, just another evil chemical ruining people's lives. Well, no. Everybody can relax, it's all good. Vanillin isn't out to get anyone.
Oh, whew.
Though unless you're a bug, a fungus, or some unfortunate microbe, in which case, yeah, you might be in a bit of trouble.
Vanillin is a single, well-defined molecule. Its structure and chemical properties are identical, whether it was extracted from a vanilla pod, synthesized from wood pulp, petrochemicals, or microbes from a cow's digestion. In simple terms, vanillin is vanillin, no matter where it comes from. Your nose and body can't tell the difference.
Vanilla orchids do not produce vanillin for us to enjoy. I know, super selfish. Evolutionary speaking, humans weren't even part of that equation. We just kind of showed up thousands of years later and decided, whoa, this smells amazing. Let's extract every little drop of it.
Every last drop.
But for the orchid, vanillin is a full-on defense system. It's an insect repellent, it's antimicrobial, antiviral, and antifungal. It's basically like the Swiss Army knife of vanilla orchid self-defense. And considering vanilla pods take up to 9 months to ripen, almost like human baby, they really need all that protection. Oh, and fun fact, fresh vanilla pods, they look like that. That is them ready for harvest, and they don't actually smell like anything. Basically, vanillin is stored in a pod bonded to sugar, and it takes an enzymatic reaction to release it, which in nature happens due to damage. But humans learn to achieve it through months of labor-intensive curing to extract every tiny drop of the pod's fragrant potential. So then how did we figure out what to do with vanilla pods? Well, as far as history tells us, someone from the Totonac tribe, indigenous people from what is now eastern Mexico, the ones I mentioned before as the first known cultivators of vanilla, they came across naturally or accidentally somewhat cured vanilla and probably thought it smells amazing because as far as taste goes, well, you know, it's not the most amazing taste and it's 0 calories and no nutritional benefits. It's basically just smell. And how did they crack the entire curing process? God knows. And considering it's no small feat, curing vanilla takes 5 to 6 months and involves multiple stages to trigger chemical reactions and develop all those amazing aromas. That's a huge commitment and it's very, very physical. It's not just, you know, leave it outside and hope for the best.
Good night.
So honestly, whoever figured this out was not burdened with pressing survival concerns. Which in itself is very impressive for back in the day, because we're talking centuries ago. So, while vanillin in its pure form might be a little bit, you know, a little bit of an irritant, for the orchid, it's a defense mechanism. For us, it's one of the greatest examples of human ingenuity. A scent so good, we bent nature to our will just to bottle it up. And I know, by this point, you're probably thinking, can we finally talk about actual perfumes? Yes, I think it's time.